The Impact of Digital Multitasking on Student Learning, presented by Dan Clark. Cell phones are a growing issue in education at the high school and post-secondary levels because they cause students to multitask, and this impacts learning. This is an important topic because teenagers are text messaging more than any other age group, and the functionality of phones continues to expand. Together, these factors increase the potential of cell phones to distract students from their academic work. This paper will answer the following research question. How does task switching induced by cell phones affect student learning in high schools and post-secondary institutes? This presentation is intended for parents, teachers, and administrators. It will help teachers and administrators make informed decisions about cell phones in class at the high school and post-secondary level. Cell phones and the internet have had a huge impact on today's students. Those born in the 1990s and beyond have been labeled the I generation, referring to digital technologies such as the iPhone or iPod, which are immensely popular with this generation. Popular media reports have suggested that this generation has an adeptness at multitasking and a need to be constantly connected. It has been reported that recent generations multitask more and find it easier. In addition to this, changes in technology are redefining how students access and integrate information. Of all forms of digital communication, text messaging on cell phones has grown the most in recent years. Recent national studies in the US in 2009 demonstrated that 75% of teens aged 12 to 17 years old owned a cell phone. This is up from 44% of teens in 2004. That means since 2004, there's been a 31% increase in cell phone ownership. There are more teens with cell phones, and they are texting more often. Between 2006 and 2009, there was a 100% increase in the percentage of teens who text daily, from 27% to 54%. Teens send an average of 3,705 text messages per month, which far exceeds any other age group. With texting being a key communication tool for teens, it is easy to see why texting in class is becoming a more significant issue in high schools and post-secondary institutes. Teachers and administrators recognize that cell phone use in class is disruptive. In 2007, 76% of high schools in the US had policies to ban phones completely from schools. In 2010, only 24% of schools had total bans on cell phones, and 62% of schools allowed phones at school but not in class. It appears that policies on phones in school are starting to relax. For the purposes of this study, there are a number of operational definitions that require clarification. Multitasking occurs when a person is doing more than one thing at exactly the same time. For example, listening to music while reading is a form of multitasking. Texting in class during a learning activity requires a specific form of multitasking called task switching. This happens when rapid changes are made from one task to another. Student learning refers to the process of acquiring knowledge and skills and is measured with efficiency and achievement. Efficiency refers to the ability of students to accurately complete learning tasks in a timely manner. And achievement is defined as the grade on an academic assessment, which is usually represented as a percentage on a single assessment or grade point average for overall grades. Disruptions caused by cell phones require students to multitask. Listening to music and eating is an example of a simple multitasking combination that's largely automated and doesn't require much thinking. These two activities are relatively different and not too cognitively challenging. It is interesting to note that people of all generations found it difficult to read and do other activities such as texting, working on the computer, talking on the phone, watching TV, or talking face to face. These activities are relatively similar and more cognitively challenging. And due to cognitive load maximums, people of all generations share mental limitations that impact how tasks are combined. The prefrontal region of the brain is used during multitasking to make conscious decisions about where to process different types of information. The prefrontal region of the brain is responsible for executive function, or the control of all cognitive processes. However, there are limits on the amount of information that can be encoded at once. When tasks are similar and cognitively challenging, the brain is unable to do more than one thing at the same time, and a choice between tasks needs to be made. Texting in class during a learning activity requires students to switch tasks. Reading a class textbook and reading a text message on a cell phone requires the same type of cognitive demand. Therefore, a substitution is required. When the brain is switching back and forth between activities, there's a three-step process that occurs each time there is an interruption. In the first step, the interruption lag begins with an alert for the incoming task, such as a cell phone ringing or vibrating. If there is sufficient time, the brain will rehearse the primary learning task to help store the information in long-term memory before switching to the other task. In the second step, the interrupting task is completed. This could be reading and responding to a text message. In the third step, the resumption lag is the process of switching back to the primary learning task. In this step, the brain recalls information from long-term memory about the primary task so that work can resume. There is a time cost in each task switching step, which increases with unfamiliar or challenging tasks. For this reason, task switching is more disruptive than multitasking. This presentation investigates the impact of task switching on 4 elements of student learning. First is the impact on efficiency. For over a decade, researchers have reported that task switching decreases efficiency. Recent research demonstrated that interruptions cause students to miss important information, take longer to complete learning activities, and make more mistakes. Second is the impact on achievement. Overall engagement with cell phones and messaging resulted in poor achievement. Interruptions from cell phones caused a decrease in specific measures of achievement in several different studies. Third is changes to learning. Learning is affected by task switching because it disrupts the process of transferring information from working memory to long-term memory. Task switching also changes the way the brain stores information in long-term memory, making that information less useful when it is later retrieved. Fourth is the impact on emotions. Cell phones are a contentious issue in class. They can create negative emotions when they are used inappropriately or when they are banned from class. First is the impact on efficiency. When multitasking, students missed information and took longer to complete tasks. In the note-taking study shown on the far left of this chart, college students in an experimental group were interrupted by a ringing cell phone twice while taking notes of a video-recorded lecture. In the control group, who was not interrupted, an average of 81% of students recorded the information in their notes. In the experimental group, an average of 48% of students recorded the information. In the memory recall study, which is shown second from the left, students were asked to recall a video-recorded speech that was interrupted for 30 seconds. Memory accuracy in the control group was 95%, but in the group that was interrupted, accuracy dropped to 79%. In the studies shown on the right, response time for a word analysis task was negatively affected by the sound of a ringing cell phone. Reaction times varied with the ringtone. Reaction times, second from the right, demonstrate an average of 1.1 seconds in the control group who was not interrupted, 2.1 seconds for students who were distracted by a tone ring from a cell phone, and a song ring was even more distracting and increased the reaction time to 2.5 seconds. Same study also investigated the effect of warning participants that they would be distracted by a cell phone, as shown on the far right. The control group in this experiment reacted in 1.1 seconds. By comparison, students that were warned reacted in 2 seconds, and students without any warning reacted in 2.4 seconds. When multitasking in real-world contexts, the time to complete tasks increased. In the results from a reading task shown on the left, students who did not message took an average of 37 minutes. Students who messaged during a reading activity took 46 minutes, and students who messaged before took only 29. This is a 59% increase in the time to finish the reading as a result of messaging during rather than before the activity. In the results from a reading task shown on the right, the control group who did not message completed the activity in 8 minutes. The group who messaged throughout took an average of 13 minutes to complete the activity. This is a 53% increase in the time to complete the whole activity as a result of messaging. Second, the impact on achievement demonstrated that students who were more engaged with cell phones and media had decreased achievement on specific learning activities and overall GPA. In terms of achievement in quantitative studies, the findings from 9 studies in this analysis show decreased achievement when learning is interrupted. Results from left to right include decreases of 4%, 28%, 6%, 10%, 7%, and 26%, 40%, 70%, and 8%. At one end of the spectrum, the 70% decrease in achievement is a significant cause for concern. However, educators need to keep in mind that the study that reported these findings was assessing verbal responses with no opportunity for review. At the other end of the spectrum, there was no significant difference found in the study at the far left because there was no time limit and no opportunity for students to reread material and prepare for the assessment. Clearly, educators need to provide students with time for review and to prepare for tests. This will encourage higher levels of achievement. It is important to note that there is a great deal of variation in the types of interruptions induced by cell phones. There has been research completed on disruptions of different frequency, duration, timing, and message length. The effective frequency of interruptions showed that with numerous digital intrusions, achievement decreased. In one study, the group receiving the most text performed nearly 7% worse on the exam. In a large study of homework practices of nearly 2,000 college students, the frequency of using Facebook or texting at the same time as doing schoolwork had a negative correlation with overall GPA. For duration, there was no significant difference in correct answers on the test for participants who experienced 5, 30, or 60-second interruptions. This means that short or long interruptions had the same effect. Variation in timing did have a significant effect. Student achievement was lower on test items that were interrupted by text messages shortly after the information was presented. When a message was received within 60 seconds of the information being presented, students averaged 72% on the test items. Interruptions 4 to 5 minutes after resulted in student averages of 90%. Student achievement was also lower when a response was sent out immediately than when students waited more than 5 minutes to respond. Finally, an analysis of message length in texts received and sent showed a significant negative correlation. Participants who received and sent more words performed worse on the tests. There are several studies that found that achievement was not significantly affected by digital interruptions. There was no significant difference in achievement between groups of college students who messaged during a reading activity before or not at all. However, students in this study had no time limit and could reread portions of text after being interrupted by a message. It was suggested that rereading may have allowed the group who messaged during the activity some amount of reinforcement that improved the test performance for this group. In real-life situations with time limits, the students who messaged during the activity may not have completed the reading, and this would have had a negative effect on achievement. In another study, students who were texting during a 20-minute lecture demonstrated academic achievement similar to the students in the control groups. However, students who were on Facebook or MSN Messenger performed significantly worse, averaging 8% lower on multiple choice tests. In this case, it was recognized that texting is a distraction, but it was argued that texting is not as interactive as Facebook, with its variety of activities on one site, nor as immediate as MSN Messenger. Facebook and MSN require more sustained attention, which resulted in poor academic achievement. Third, changes to the way students learn occur because of multitasking behaviors. Humans learn through the interaction of working memory and long-term memory. Working memory is used for conscious processing and can only support a small number of items at the same time. Information stored in working memory needs to be rehearsed within 30 seconds. If it is not rehearsed, it is lost, because it is not transferred to long-term memory. Long-term memory is central to all thinking processes because cognition depends on the enormous knowledge base in long-term memory. This knowledge base is filled with personal experiences, facts, understanding, and skills. Most facts, knowledge, and personal experiences are stored in declarative memory, whereas skills and habits are stored in procedural memory. MRIs have been used to show that single cognitive tasks are processed in declarative memory in the hippocampus. By comparison, multitasking activities are processed in the dorsal striatum, which is the portion of the temporal lobe in the brain that is used for repetitive behaviors and procedural memory. Declarative memory is used to solve complex problems. The brain recognizes the characteristics of a problem based on extensive personal experiences stored in declarative memory. Digital distractions decrease the use of this memory and increase the use of procedural memory. Both types of memories support learning, but declarative memory is more flexible and procedural less efficient and useful. Procedural memory is less suitable because it relies on a part of the brain used for habitual or rote learning through repetition of complex activities. This part of the brain is not conducive to analytical thinking because information is retrieved in integrated steps, not distinct parcels of information. Fourth, impact on emotions. Cell phones in the classroom are cause for concern for many students and educators. The emotional effects of cell phone interruptions may cause students to change from a neutral emotion to feelings of displeasure. This emotional change makes it more difficult for students to reconnect to learning tasks after an interruption. Distractions on a group level may produce neutral or negative responses. In a research study before any interruptions, 80% of participants had neutral expressions. After the first interruption, only 33% of participants continued to have those same expressions. More importantly, after the first interruption, another third of the participants exhibited expressions of anger, which were not there before. When the participants were upset, it was harder for them to recommit to the learning task once interrupted. The controversial nature of cell phones in schools and attempts to limit their use encourages many negative emotions, Students in one study were frustrated at not being allowed to have any time to use cell phones in class. Another study provided support for this observation by demonstrating that students who were provided an opportunity before a learning activity were the most efficient of any group. Emotion is an important consideration because negative emotions use cognitive resources, pull attention away from the learning task, and impair achievement. The studies in this analysis provide practical implications for teachers and administrators. Educators need to encourage responsible use of cell phones by engaging students in creating school and classroom expectations for appropriate use, teaching metacognition strategies, and using novel strategies such as technology breaks are other implications. And these are especially relevant in high schools, where students are less mature and have fewer metacognitive strategies to monitor their own use of technology. Establishing school and classroom expectations for cell use by involving students encourages more responsible use and motivation to comply. It has been suggested that making students part of conversations about technology will help students feel a sense of control. Teachers who have allowed limited use of these devices during non-instructional time found that there were fewer issues when the students were asked to come together as a group. These teachers also found that some students produced great work while connected to their media of choice. Giving students some level of control over their personal technology may also help minimize internal task switching. Therefore, teaching students metacognitive strategies will help learners understand the negative effects of multitasking and develop some alternate strategies. It has been proposed that a curriculum on multitasking that would take students through some practical memory experiments would help them to understand some of the negative effects of multitasking. This curriculum would also share some current research findings and practice some of the alternate strategies. One of these strategies are called technology breaks that are 1 to 2 minute breaks every 15 minutes. In a typical 45 to 50 minute class, this would provide students with 2 quick breaks. Research suggested that occasional planned breaks are better than frequent unplanned interruptions because a higher frequency of interruptions decreased student achievement. Finally, if educators can encourage students to delay receiving and sending messages after the presentation of material, better learning may result, and achievement will be less negatively affected by digital interruptions. In conclusion, the studies in this analysis demonstrate that task switching resulting from cell phone interruptions has a negative impact on student learning. This is a significant issue in education because cell phones are a ubiquitous part of daily life for students. This study concludes that there are significant negative effects on efficiency, achievement, how students learn, and the emotions of students in classrooms at the high school and post-secondary levels. Educators cannot ignore these impacts and are encouraged to consider more than simply banning cell phones from class. Teachers and administrators are encouraged to consider engaging students in the development of standards for responsible use, teaching metacognition strategies, and using novel strategies such as technology breaks. Successful implementation of these strategies will have a positive impact on the issue of cell phone distractions in the classroom.